This is the year to abound. And we have been tackling all sorts of things that keep us from moving forward in life. And some of the things that we've been coming up against is fear and guilt and shame. And so tonight, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Terilee Harrison, who is going to be talking with us about how to overcome shame and move forward in your life. I am Shantae, the host of Next Level Conversations, and I want to welcome you to tonight's show. Terilee is on a mission to help over 1 million people let go of shame. She is the founder of Bree Talks, Bold, Real, Impactful, a TED Talk-like experience for Christian business owners to share their story, cause, or method in the most impactful way. Terilee empowers speakers to gain credibility, develop diverse income streams, and let go of self-limiting beliefs. She is a global speaker and has written numerous books, including one that's coming out this year called Bold Vulnerability, The Speaker's Guide for Turning Your Story into Your Story Power. I am excited to welcome Miss Terilee Harrison.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. You have no idea, my friend.
I am so good. Thank you so much for traveling the long way that you did to come and sit down with us on tonight. And this topic about shame, which is something that you are an expert in, talking with women, not just women, but people about and helping them overcome this. Shame is it's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing.
And it impacts all of our lives. And before we dive into how to overcome it, I know as a person who helps others get through it, you had to have a shame story yourself. You got to have a story in order to share a story or to help somebody get through their story. So why don't you start us out by telling us just a little bit more about yourself, and then let us hear your shame story.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
What an honor it is to be here. It's almost been a year since we met.
Has it?
We met like the first weekend of March.
You're right, at the Win-Win-Win, at one of the Win-Win Women global events.
For International Women?
Yes. Well, look at it.
I know. So what a joy it is to be with you. And you said a lot of the things about me. I love working with speakers. I've been working with business owners for many years. I've served thousands of business owners in the business networking industry. And I was actually, believe it or not, online doing online networking well ahead of COVID.
Really?
So it's not to brag. It's just that I was living in Singapore. We were serving in Singapore, my family and I happened to be taken away from my network in Los Angeles when we moved over there. And so we were, the fall of 2018, we were doing online networking. But what I can tell you, Shantae, is that back then, people would say, I just don't think I can network on screen. But we've found out that we can.
You can.
And it's changed everything.
No, go ahead. I'm listening to you.
But it's changed everything.
It has.
For us, right? Because it's one thing, and it was a joy to drive an hour in rush hour traffic to get to you.
No.
But we don't
came all the way from Arlington, Texas.
But that's beside the point. I'm able to do that. But sometimes we can totally do business with people around the country and around the world with a click of a button, flipping open our laptop. So if you were to ask me, I love working with speakers and I love networking, making connections and helping people meet the people that they need to meet to live out their calling, live out their passion and grow their mission.
I like that. I love helping people meet the people they need to meet in order to help them live out their calling and mission. Because, and that's so good because we need one another. And as we're going to talk about, as we're going to get to later, there's a story, your story helps me and my story helps you. And as we connect, we're sharing our stories to provide more hope and helping one another. I love it.
See, and that's what you get here at Next Level Conversation. A lot of times we just show up and we're very shallow. Oh, I love to cook. I don't think anyone says I love to clean. That was the next thing on my mouth, but that's not right. But it's like, you know, I enjoy art. I enjoy singing. I love to cook or whatever, but we don't get into the deep stuff.
Yes. And I will tell you, I was actually writing something because somebody was asking me not too long ago, what makes Next Level so different?
Yes.
And one of the things that I said is when you get vulnerability, you get real
Yes.
people with sharing their vulnerable stories, just completely releasing everything and being completely open and honest, and you
Yes.
get connectability.
Yes.
So we connect with one another through our stories, through our shared trials, and our growth forward, our transformation.
Yes.
And so you get that, you get real, honest, true individuals that are not afraid to share their shame, share their story of shame.
Yes. And this is the platform that I love, and why I think also why we hit it off, stayed in touch, because I think that we love some of this very
Yes.
same thing.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So if we were to get to the nitty gritty of why today I'm 58.
Today's your birthday?
No, but today
okay.
I'm 58. Today, in this moment, I'm 58.
Okay.
Whenever anybody watches this, right?
Okay.
And there was a 30-year period of my life when the shame I carried was so heavy, but the thing is, I didn't realize it. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
Right? Right. So at the time, I was in 6th grade. Can you remember back to that time? It is awkward.
I can go back just a little bit. I have snippets because my story is a little similar to yours. I have snippets of the 6th grade.
Yes. So it's interesting around like 12, you're awkward, you're starting to go through puberty. And I remember, you're gonna laugh because you were way younger than me. You were not 58 for sure. But we learned about the birds and the bees on a film strip in school. You know film strips?
Okay, the ones that you wrote.
Like you put the little thing through and they would click.
Yeah,
click.
that was,
I mean, right, I know, it's big time.
wow.
Big time. But back then, that's how we learned about it. And the thing about, for me, is it was awkward learning about those things. And everyone's like, "Ew, is that going to happen to me?" Right? And the interesting, crazy thing of all things was, as we were learning as young ladies about menstruation and beginning our periods, and everyone's like, "It's going to happen to me." You know what? I learned about that time that I would never start my period like all of you.
Really?
Yes. I had already had some surgeries, and so my parents knew that some things were going on. I had some kidney issues when I was younger. My parents had a far better knowing into about that time than I did. They let me know when it was time for me to know. But I actually had to have surgery to be able to have my first period.
Really?
Yes. And the way it was presented to me back then, also pre-Google, imagine for a minute. But the way it was presented to me was that I had been a twin, the egg hadn't split. And so with the information I had, I took on that I was different than all other girls.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. So the thing about 12-year-old Terilee was that she looked pretty on the outside, like nobody knows, but I was walking around carrying that burden. And I have beautiful Christian parents, right? But they thought it wasn't a good idea. They thought it wasn't a good idea for us to tell anyone. So like my little sister didn't know.
Really?
My best friend from 6th grade didn't know. We just didn't tell anybody because they didn't want people making fun of me.
Okay,
Are you with me?
I can understand that.
Are you with me? So I can appreciate that now. But at 12, how I was made was so bad that it wasn't okay to tell. Okay.
They made you feel like you were completely different and something was wrong with you.
Yes. And I didn't know what to do with it, and I stuffed it all deep inside. Now, the thing about shame, so shame is when we feel bad about ourselves as a person. There's probably people listening that are like, yes, and this was my shame moment, right? Right? Because we all have them. It just depends on when our first one was. And for some of us, it's all big. It doesn't matter what it is and how big it is. It all feels really super big.
It feels huge, like the world is.
Yes. Like, and it's not okay to be me.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, let's finish my shame story, but let's just say this. you know, shame comes from 3 places. So for those that are sitting here going, oh, my shame moment, right?
Mhm.
So shame can be like this, the awkward feelings about how we're made. And it can be everything from, it's not usually that you're born with an underproductive reproductive tract, right?
Mhm.
It can be that your skin's too light, your skin's too dark,
Mhm.
you're too fat, you're
Mhm.
too thin, you're too tall, you're too short. And I've had people come up to me, yeah, my skin's too dark, or yeah, I'm too tall. And the thing is, it's personal, so it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. We might say, "Oh, you're not too tall," or "Your skin's beautiful." That doesn't matter. It's what we believe and how we take it
Yes.
on, right? So the other shame moments can come from the things that people have done to us.
Yes.
Okay. And so if we were to poll people, it is just stunning how, I mean, I can be on Zooms and so many people are just all sharing about their sexual abuse. And it's true. And it is, seems impossible to fathom how rampant it is in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Impossible to fathom. But it doesn't even need to be that. It can be that someone has stolen from you, someone has cheated on you. It's the things that people have done to us that we hold in that make us feel bad about ourselves as a person.
You know, as I've been preparing for this show, and I've been dealing, well, I like you lived with shame for a very long time, and God took me on a journey to overcome that
Yes.
shame. But as I've been preparing for this show, and I was just writing some notes, and I thought about it, and I thought about my moments of shame, and I said, I felt shame for what someone who was stronger than me did to me. And I mean, you know I mean, that's some bad stuff when somebody else does something to you,
Yes.
but you feel shameful for the thing that they
Right.
did to you.
Right.
And it's a rough thing to get over.
Yes. I think that we can do our best, but you know, we carry these experiences
Yeah.
with us. We carry these experiences with us, and not to jump to a conclusion, but it's really through God that we can begin to let it go.
I agree.
Right?
Because you walk around, if you were anything like me, and if any of our guests, our audience is anything like me, I walked around, and part of me used to always think everybody can see. Everybody knows. And it was something that was just on the inside of me, something that happened and it's over and done with, but I carried it. I carried it in my mind. I carried it in my heart. I carried it. I'm like, everybody can see. And I feel so ashamed. I feel so ashamed. Everybody sees and everybody knows. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of things I didn't say a lot of things because those who didn't know, I wanted them to know me outside of the things that were causing me shame. And then you begin to do things as a result of the shame that you feel. Am I jumping ahead?
No, no, but that's right where we're going. Then you begin to do the things. Then you begin to do the things.
Yeah, you begin to do things as a result of the shame that you feel, and then that compounds the shame. And so you have shame and you have guilt. And for me, you have an extra layer of fear. So it just but it stems from that one moment, that first moment of shame.
So right. You're so right. There's one more place that shame comes from that people may identify in this moment, like my shame moment, and that's shame from the things that you've done. And there's, you know, we all make mistakes.
Yes.
We're sinful creatures. So let's just cut to the chase. You know we are. I feel like there's though some things that we do that can seem bigger than others. And it's those things, or even it could be, I've known of people that like accidentally, like where they were in a car accident where they had like hit someone head on and killed somebody, like, right? And they didn't mean to, but I'm telling you, these shame moments, they attach to us. And as someone I was chatting with today talked about how their life, like how they diverted, like they were on a path. I thought this is so true. I feel like we're all on a path. Life happens, the shame happens, and we all divert.
Detour.
We detour. But you know what? There is an opportunity to come back.
Yes.
And what a blessing that is.
Yes.
What a blessing that is. So in my life then, I'm carrying this all through, we called it middle school and high school. And what do? We try to cover it up. So like I was all about perfectionism. Like I wanted to get the best boys, get the best grades, and like everything to look perfect. I didn't realize I was trying to look perfect so no one could get close. I didn't realize that. I had stuffed it in and I wasn't going to let it out. So the big kickers for me, because this is the thing, when we stuff it in, I don't care if you stuff it for 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 decades, it will start to come out at some point.
It will start to come out.
Yes, it's kind of like a horror show.
You can, I mean, no, seriously. And a few weeks ago, we had a clinical rehabilitation coach, Taylor Davis, on the show. And we were talking about the body keeps score.
Yes.
Because you start stuffing all of this stuff in, and the body, it's taking inventory. And the only person that we're hurting, and that was hard, that took me a while to get, the only person that I'm hurting by carrying this shame is myself.
Oh, yes.
Because the people who did the things to me that started this cycle of shame, they're going on with their life. They're not worried about it anymore. But me, I'm carrying this shame in my body. And part of my healing journey was apologizing to my body for the things that I did to it, because I was so shameful for what happened to me. And it was eating, it was sex, it was talking bad to myself. I wouldn't look in the mirror. There's all sorts of things that you do when you're walking around with shame.
Yes.
And then you start feeling guilty for the things that you're doing to yourself.
It's so right. I really believe that shame is at the root of all addictions. And as you named some of them, but it doesn't matter. Like we think it's always like alcohol or drugs, but addiction can be addiction to so many things.
Yes.
So many things.
I ended up with a porn addiction. I ended up with an alcohol addiction. Just so many things to hide. And I don't want to take away from your story. I know I'm just yapping. The other thing I used to do, I know we're just having fun. The other thing that I used to do, I felt so shameful from, and it went, you know, when you trace it all the way down, but I would never wear a dress this color. I would never wear anything with bold colors because I needed to hide. I needed to stay hidden because of the shame of what happened and then what I subsequently did as a result of what happened. Shame is deep.
Shame is deep.
Shame is deep.
So when I started to go off the rails, I say, and a lot of people say this actually, this isn't unique, but I say I began looking for love in all the wrong places. And so like starting in I think from 24 to 34 of my life. So now we know where I am today. I started at 12. So 12 years in, man, I found myself in relationships with 3 different men. None of them were good for me. And in that time, I was the cheater. I was cheated on, and I've been the other woman.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's just the place I was in. And the thing about being cheated on was this wasn't a normal, everyday, average cheat. All cheats are no fun. All cheats are no fun. But this person knew I was married. This person lured me from my life, from Ohio out to California. And guess what? He was already married. Oh. He was married when he lured me from my marriage, and I left my entire life behind. I literally said, God, I know what you want me to do, and I'm going to do it anyway. Hello, like, not good news. I don't recommend. My life was a movie of the week.
I know. We're going to have to come back for that whole story because I'm nosy.
That's episode number 2. I mean, the drama. And he's a mean, angry alcoholic. He lied to me about everything I ever knew about him. I mean, and guess what? The shame. I just kept thinking, I'm getting exactly what I deserve. Right? Oh, I'm getting exactly what I deserve. True.
Oh, and I, and I'm only feeling it because I'm just going back to when I was in those days and those moments. And that very thing, and you tell yourself that over and over and over
surely
and over.
I deserve
surely I
this.
Yes.
Why would I leave behind? Why would I leave that behind? And oh my goodness, right? And I hadn't dealt with any of the shame, and it's just oozing.
Yeah.
And so when I tell you I was the other woman, like by the time I finished with this mess, I kind of wanted to be with somebody, but I didn't want to be with
Yeah.
somebody. And that's the thing about being the other woman, if anybody's watching right now, is we all deserve to have our own man.
Yeah.
We don't need anybody else's man. And it's one of the most painful, hard roads to go. It's not okay. But when you're deep in your shame, you
Yeah.
settle.
You do. You
settle.
think that yes, this
You
is the
settle.
best that I can do.
This is the best.
This is
all I
this is
want.
all I deserve.
And this is all I want.
And
I don't want more.
And you mistake people treating you other than the way you should be treated as love.
Yes. Oh, I thought I loved him.
And it's so distorted in your mind.
Oh, yes.
And God would just constantly tell me, who told you?
At that point, I was not even dealing with God because I couldn't deal with him. I was like, I'm doing this, and yeah. So what I didn't tell you in my story was, along in this mess, I know what I told you about my health. I had a daughter. I have a daughter. She's 31 today. With gentleman number 2, right? And then I'm going to tell you the game changer and what began to turn things around for me. And that's, we could talk episode 3 all about my mother. She's amazing. Okay. My mother, wonderful mother, loving, kind, would do anything for me. But she passed away. She'd been sick most of my life. She had diabetes. And when she passed away, I was like, wait a minute, you know better than this. And so as I began seeking God, talking to him again, I broke it off with gentleman number 3. And that's when I found out I was pregnant.
Girl. We having a whole show.
You didn't even know. You didn't? Did you know?
No.
Okay. So the thing about this is, I was living in California, growing up in Ohio, and in California, people kind of let their things hang out. In Ohio, we all have things, but we hide them. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Like we want everyone to be like, oh, I don't have that thing. Yeah. So I had some coworkers. I knew people that had babies with their married boyfriends, and I was judging them so harshly previously. I'd be like, how could you let that happen? I would think.
Oh, do you think? Let me ask you this, because that's a very good point. Do you? Because I didn't know that I was so judgmental.
Oh. When you were filled with shame?
When I was filled with shame, I would point fingers at everybody else, even knowing I was shameful. Now, see, I knew I was shameful. I would say to myself, "Oh, I feel so ashamed," but I didn't think it was as bad as it was. But I was so judgmental towards everybody else, and couldn't understand why they was doing all the stuff they're doing, and never seeing the stuff that I was doing.
Yeah, okay, but I definitely knew I was doing stuff. I definitely knew I was doing stuff. And so the thing about me is my drama with my daughter's dad, I pretty much had been a single mom, and I decided to go ahead and have that baby. And
God knew what he was doing.
So today, my children are 31 and 23. And yeah, I mean, and my son, he's one of the greatest gifts of my life. Like, right? I mean, you got to roll. You got to roll. So it wasn't long after, believe it or not, though, that because I've been married now it's going on like 23 years now with Terry, my husband, that we are now been in ministry for years. And what I want people to know is that God can redeem you, and God can use you if you'll let him.
Yes.
And when I went back to God and said, what do you say when you start to talk to him after 10 years of all that, right? He's just there waiting.
He is.
He's just there waiting.
Gives me shivers because
he's just there waiting.
He is, and he's just he wants you.
He does. Like, and I know that he's shaking his head at me so many times. He still does, right? but he's shaking his head at me so many times. So let me say, just for the fun of it, that I always say that I thank God in eharmony.com. My husband and I met on eHarmony back when, like, in the beginning.
Really?
Back in the beginning, because I didn't trust picking. I let the computer do the job. My picker was all messed up.
Shame.
My picker wouldn't allow me to pick.
Shame will do that for you, because again, you choose out of the pain and the shame.
Yes.
And you get these consequences. So when you start moving out of it, you just stop trusting yourself.
Oh, I had no trust in myself. I had no trust in myself. But the dangerous part was Terry married me and I still hadn't dealt with this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
With me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the game changer in my life, 30 years later, I'm 42. Terry and I've been married 7 years. So Cole is starting to grow up, and my daughter Jackie, right? And I had gone from like corporate life. I will say this one thing. My perfectionism my whole life, it really paid off, because I wasn't a poor single mom. I was a successful single mom, right? Because I'd gone to college and I'd done all the things I had, right? And so I didn't come off walking wounded with my shame, but I was. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But here we are. I had like started to move into personal development, professional development, working for myself. And that was my first look at any of those things, right? Because I was just always walking wounded. So I talked to a business coach one day, and we're sitting at Starbucks, and he goes, "What would you like to work on?" And I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, my house, or I'm unorganized. I said, I feel like I'm losing leads. Like I would go networking and come home and like I wouldn't be able to find the business cards to follow up, right? And I said, my house, when you walk in, it's all picked up. But if you open any drawer, any cupboard, any closet, poor Terry, we can't park in the garage. And the gentleman looked across the table at me and goes, "Tell me about your childhood." And I was like, literally, I was like, "Oh, he thinks I was abused or something." And I said, "Oh, no, I had a very loving childhood." I go, "But I was sick a lot." I hadn't thought about that in so many years, right? I was waking up full of shame every day if my feet hit the floor, but it wasn't like, "You're different than all other girls."
Yeah.
Right? And so that night I went to, we had Google then. Yeah, 16 years ago, we had Google, right? So I didn't know what to say, and I typed in "absence of vagina," and no one was more surprised than me when a bunch of stuff came up. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Like I have a condition 1 in 5,000 women have, and nobody's talking about it."
Wow.
Yes. And the thing about it is, they don't find out when they're like 12 and they're ready to have their period. They find out a few years later because they're also born without a uterus. And they find out as young teens that they're never going to have a baby. But the thing about these women is, now I want you to think about who do you hear on the news about, like the uterus transplants? They're probably my people. The uterus transplants, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That is so mind-blowing.
It is quite mind-blowing, but there's more. But there's more. As I began to, because for me, like that knocked through, like if I have this load of shame, it was like a bomb went off and like opened up, because I wasn't alone anymore. I thought I was different than all other girls. Like that's a big load to carry for 30 years. But there was more. That was when I realized that in all I could see, these women don't birth their own children. My son and
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look at God.
Look at God. Antea, I was a miracle for 30 years and I had no idea.
Look at that.
I know. And that's why I feel so called. Like I knew, I was like, look what God did for me. I can't keep quiet about this. I needed to heal. I truly needed to heal.
Is that when you decided?
I began working on myself, but I knew I was called, and I began like slowly speaking this out. Because I think it was like 3 years later that I like published my book.
Okay.
I really began speaking and researching. But I didn't get the tie-in to shame until I went to write my testimony book, and I called a book coach and said, "This is my story," just like I told you. And she goes, "Oh, this is a book about shame." And I go, I remember, I was like, "It is?" you know, I had no idea. So that's when I began researching shame and learning about shame. I had no idea. But the thing is we all have shame and nobody talks about it.
Yes. Nobody talks about it. And we think that these things that we do are the things that people that we love are doing.
Yes.
We just think that they're just acting out. They're just being disobedient. They're just being,
and they're struggling with their addiction.
Yes. And they're feeling shame for it. That's one of the, I've learned to give people more grace now.
Yes.
Because I understand it in a way that I didn't understand it before.
Right. It's so true. It's so true.
So because and we're going to open up, we're going to open it up for the audience to get some questions here in a minute. But I want to really focus on the steps, because I know you were talking. I think you said there was 3 or 4 steps. I can't remember that you work with people about on overcoming this shame. And everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different walk.
Yep.
Everybody goes through a different journey, because God knows us all individually. But I do want to hear.
I think if I could focus on one to start, and that would just be the importance of not keeping it inside anymore. So you may or may not feel called to go, like I knew I was called to go tell a story. Like I can't imagine facing God at the end of my life and that I kept quiet.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to face him and be like, you missed the memo, girl. You know, that's not what I want, right? But yet the more, if we don't let it out, and that can come in several ways. It can be that you just share it with one trusted friend. So often when I speak and tell my story, people come to me and go, I've never told anybody.
But okay. And I'm going to tell you, you don't know how important what you just said is, because I think that was one of my, if I really think about it, that was probably my starting. Well, no, I had to acknowledge. Yes. I had to acknowledge first. But then God was like, you have to break the silence. You have got to talk about this. And I remember when I went to talk, I was literally sick I was sick. I was throwing up and I had diarrhea. Going to talk with the counselor about the things that I was dealing with. So how do you help people break that silence? Because it's not easy to share our pain and share our story. How do you help them break that?
I'm not like a trauma-informed care coach. I really feel that my calling is the messenger to let people know that it is okay to tell your story. That one of the greatest gifts, one of my biggest lessons is the greatest gift you can give yourself is to allow others to love you for who you really are. We just never give them the chance.
Oh, let me repeat that back to you, because that was beautiful. Can you repeat it back? The greatest gifts that you can give yourself is to allow others to love you for you, because you never give them.
We just don't.
We never give this opportunity.
Right. And we don't have to sit in, like, we've given a whole narrative here. But even inside of it, what did I say? I did give you some details, but I said, you know, I've been, you kind of went, ooh, I've been the cheater, I've been cheated on, and I've been the other woman, right? We can say our story without giving details.
Yeah.
Right. There are things that hold us back, like fear of being exposed. What will people think of me? There's absolutely the fear of revealing a sticky mess, because so much of our shame is tied into the things people have done to us. And we don't want to talk about our family member or our neighbor, but there can be ways to give enough information that people understand. Yeah. I recently shared in the speech, because this is like my speech, like, hey, everybody, you know, your story is your superpower, and I empower people to go ahead and share. And I have a gentleman who he was totally rocking TikTok. I think he's about 60. I hate to say, I don't think I'm about 60, but he's about 60 also. He's about 60 also. And he says, I was only talking about like personal and professional development until I heard you. And he goes, and now he like full on talks about I've experienced incarceration, addiction, I've been suicidal, and I've dealt with depression, right? And it's not that we get the full incarceration story, etc. You know, but you get what he's been through. You get his path. And now he's out talking about self-stigma, which totally falls under shame. Yes. And he goes, and I'm only doing it because you gave me permission. He just heard me speak in December.
I was literally about to say, I was thinking that when you were saying what it is that you do, I was thinking you give people permission to share their stories and
Yes.
to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And again, and God tells me this all the time. One, he tells me never to be ashamed of what it is that you've been through.
Yeah. No.
Don't ever be ashamed
I
of it.
remember when you spoke when I met you almost a year ago, and you said you were called to show people your scars.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
I remember that. It's beautiful.
And it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy. But the more I think about it and the more I understand it, we're living in a world right now where everybody's trying to hide and be something else. And there's so much deceit. And it's showing our scars.
Yes.
Sharing our stories,
Yes.
that we create these real connections and people know that they're not alone.
They need to know they're not alone, because we have more in common than what we think. The details of our stories are different, but our stories are still so the same. They're so interwoven, but we don't know if we don't allow that. And this is why I've created this Bree Talks platform, is not only to empower people, but to give them a place to share online and in person. Yes.
I love it. And it starts with, overcoming shame starts with breaking the silence.
It does.
Breaking the silence, because
It does.
they can't get you. Oh my God. Okay. and I'm about to take some questions from our audience. So go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat. But hold on, let me just say this right here, Terilee, real quick, because I forgot about everybody else and we're just sitting here talking. But what God made me realize, in my silence, the enemy was beating my head in, beating me up, just, knocking you over the head with the things that you've done and the things that have happened to you.
Yes.
And in that silent space, there are no other voices saying, but you're better than this. And you can overcome this. And this isn't the end of your story. You're greater. You can use your story. So in that silence, while you're being silent, he's the only voice that's speaking. It took me years to realize this. Years. And that's why God was like, in order to get out of this, one, you got to be okay acknowledging it. But two, you have got to break the silence. And when you break the silence, you take the power that the shame has away.
You do.
And I love that you're giving people that their power back.
It's a joy. It's a joy. This idea of wanting to help over 1 million people let go of shame, through the owning and the embracing and the telling of their stories, it's a joy to wake up to that calling every day.
What is one of the things that when you run into people who are, because I'm imagining by the time people come to you, they're ready to share are they ready to share their story, or are they not talking at all?
A lot of times. I'm happy to talk to anyone who isn't talking at all. I definitely like encouraging them to begin to have those conversations, right? Most of the time they're a little ready, but this is the one thing that is important in this process, and that's every time you tell your story, it's healing to you and healing to others.
That is so true.
So true. Every time. Every time.
That is so true. What is one of the things that you find people struggle with sharing their stories?
This has just been even more recently in my conversations with folks. But if you think about it, the more I encourage people, it's that we need to consider who are the stakeholders when I tell my story. I might feel called to tell my story, but who does it affect? Like as I talk about my childhood, how's my dad feel? Like I haven't really said anything bad, but yet, how do they feel? Or let's say that you are ready to go talk about overcoming alcoholism, and you're now with your second wife, and you're going to go tell all this stuff. And how does that second wife feel?
Yeah.
I've had some conversations on Zoom with some of my speakers and people that I mentor, and oh my gosh, I was like, I wish we could just put this group Zoom out, because they're talking about my sister, my cousin, my uncle, and just how people reacted, and people saying things like, that wasn't the childhood I had. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's like, right?
And that's, you know what, that's so fun. That's so funny because that's so real because the childhood that I had and the things that I was dealing with because of what happened to me was totally different from the childhood that my sisters and brothers had.
Yeah.
And the way that they saw life. And that is very true because one of the things that held me, and again, it's just the enemy, but one of the things that kept me silent for so long was how it was going to, if I share my story, how my mom would feel, or
Right.
how other, you know, how
Yeah.
other people would feel as a result of the things that happened.
Yeah.
And so it keeps you silent.
It keeps you silent.
It-
And yes. And okay, one of the key words we haven't used ready is the F word, and that's forgiveness.
Oh,
Yeah,
yep.
just don't want you to fall off your chair. But it's forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, allowing God to forgive us. Like in the beginning, like I knew He forgave me, but I couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
I couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
And understanding that He separates our sin as far as the east is from
from-
the west. He hurls our iniquities to the bottom of the sea. Like,
Yes.
allow Him to do His job.
Yes.
And love, if you can, in your journey, like loving on those people, like and just growing up and realizing that my parents did the best they could with
Yeah.
how can you imagine if that was, I can't imagine as a parent if that was my child.
Yeah.
And I would have done the same thing, I'm pretty sure.
I always, I have a friend, Tanya, who we talk all the time about the things of our past, and she's a mother of 4, and who's, you know, who's done some things, and I talk with her about my mom and some of the things that happened, and I always remember she did the best that she could
right.
with what she knew and what she could
right.
do at the moment.
That's right.
And that's and that's why I have no other choice but to forgive her. And you're right, if part of this journey of overcoming the shame was forgiving the people who did it,
Yep.
forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
But I had to go one step further.
What? Tell me.
I had to forgive God.
Oh, for letting it happen?
Yes.
Oh.
I had to forgive God. And then God was like, now let it go. I had, you know, it was a whole journey of all of it, full on. And everything is wrapped in forgiveness.
Yes, it is. The F word.
Everything is
shame.
wrapped in forgiveness.
Everything
The F
is.
word for shame is forgiveness. We need to write a whole book on
We
that.
could.
Okay, let me ask, because I don't want to miss their questions.
Let's see what questions.
How do you use self-compassion daily to start healing?
Oh. You know what? What comes to mind for me is journaling
Oh,
and gratitude.
yes.
And we're just reminding yourself that your past doesn't define you. And
Yes.
focusing on the good things that you have now. I would have never imagined, like today, that I could be in this marriage I've longed for, that will be the marriage as long as God gives us it with our lives, right?
Yes.
And it's a joy. And so whatever you have right now, just take it one day at a time.
That's beautiful. Because the only day that matters, and you learn this in recovery.
Yes.
The only day that matters, the only moment that matters. Tell myself, moment right here.
That's right.
Don't even worry about the next moment. Don't even worry about the next 5 seconds, Shantae. Just get through this moment, this day right here.
It's really important that you surround yourself with the right friends.
Yes.
The friends, when you have when in your shame story, they're probably not going to be your friends as you move on. And that's
did you lose a lot of friends?
Sure. Sure, right? I mean, because they're the friends who, you know, you're in the middle of all your junk and doing your things, and no, they're not the same friends. And some of it, there's a book in itself, right? But something to remember when it comes to self-compassion is there's just something about having the right girlfriend that you can text. You don't even need to have that person that's your bestie that you text every day. It can just be having the right people to be able to to text. That's a moment of self-compassion right there.
Girl. And just be able to text them and say, sometimes all you can get out is, girl.
That's it. That's it.
And they just get it.
Yep, that's all you have to say.
With no judgment. And you know, as we are laying out some of the things to help us overcome shame, because we've talked about breaking the silence.
Yep.
We've talked about the F word, forgiveness, as when it comes to shame. But as you said, having a journaling is
Yep.
really good. But one of the things that, as part of my journey, God was like, you need to create a space.
Mm.
And this is where you're talking about your community, your girlfriends, create a space that's safe, where you can talk,
Yes.
where you can release, where you can let these things go with people who you don't have to tell them the details, but you can sit in their space and you can go to that space when you're feeling, or even when it tries to come back on you. Because understand, and I don't know about you, but even though I'm over the shame, there are times with different things that it tries to reattach itself to me.
Listen, when you've been that deep in it for so long,
it don't just, it tries to reattach itself.
Yes.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. What does shame feel like, and how do you differentiate shame from guilt and other stuff?
Okay. So guilt is when you feel you've done a bad thing. Shame is when you feel bad about yourself as a person. So it's definitely full of the I'm not good enough, so it's not okay to be me. It's all that, like, they will talk about imposter syndrome, but hello, that's shame. And it's going to be like, and I don't know in your life, like I did talk about the perfectionism, but I would try in my life to move forward, and I would get so far and then self-sabotage and get so far and self-sabotage. And it's not that I don't self-sabotage at all anymore, but it's not the major.
Girl, and didn't it just make you even more disgusted with yourself?
Of course, man. Of course.
I really thought that I was the only person because you would literally go so far. And then what would happen to me was I would go so far, and the enemy would see, oh, she thinks she getting, she thinks she getting a little grown. And so he would remind me of that thing.
Oh, he's so busy.
And
so busy.
And then that whole, it was just like a shame blanket would just come back over me.
No, he's just constantly busy. I say for those 30 years of silence, he was like just having a really good time. And he does not want us talking about him.
Sure don't. Sure don't. And definitely doesn't want us revealing this part of him.
No.
It wasn't until, I'm telling you, you're so right, you got to break the silence. It wasn't until God was like, tell it so he can't hold it over you.
There was a time last fall when I was like, Bree Talks was, I don't know, I started it in May of 24, right? So like maybe September, October. There was a Friday afternoon I remember so vividly, and I was like in bed all day on Indeed.com looking for jobs, like curled up in a ball in my phone. And I was like, no, this is just what he wants. He wants me in a ball on the bed. He doesn't want me encouraging people to tell their stories of hope and healing. He doesn't want me to help a million people. That's just what he wants. I thought, I can't let him get away with that.
You got to, and again, you got to speak. That's the reason why Bree Talks is even so important. You have to speak.
Yes.
And you don't have to be a professional speaker. You don't have to use eloquent words. You can be just as raw. You can be you.
Yes.
Because your people are going to connect with the realness of you.
Yes.
But they need to see your scars.
They do.
What do you find is the hard, what do you personally, in your own story, your own life, is the hardest part about sharing?
I will say that the greatest gift is to allow others to love you for who you really are. But there are some people who still may judge. But you know what? It's worth it for the people I'm going to help. And you just have to deal with when it comes. It's come very little. That's the one thing, is if I could impart that with the permission, to tell your story. It's been very little over the years that I've had anybody say anything, but the thing about it is it's the people that you help, people who come to you and say, I could never do that, but you did, right? And when they come and they say, because people all hear different aspects of my story because of their shame situation, right? So I can have people come and share 15 different ways that it helped them, like, because it's all different.
Yeah.
Because it's all different. And yeah, sometimes you still feel, we're human. We can still feel like, oh, and I will say, and I'm serious, like, God can use you in ministry if you'll let him. It doesn't mean that sometimes people don't ask, or like we let them know I share my testimony, right? And it does, but at the same time, there is that element of, yeah, I'm being exposed here a little bit, but if God can change me, he can change anyone.
Girl, let me ask you this, because we're about to wrap up. We have a few more minutes. And so I'm gonna ask you this question, and then I want you to do something else for me. What are some steps, real quick, that someone can take? Because you say the greatest gift you can give yourself is allowing others to love you. What are some steps that somebody can take to allow others to love them
for who they really are? I'm going to go back to it's important just to share it with one person. Maybe you have a best friend and you haven't ever shared with them. I hope that we don't have a spouse or a partner that we haven't shared, but it could be that that's the case. And it's a great first step. And it also could be that maybe it's just time that you talked about vomiting and all the things, but maybe it's time to go get that counselor. Maybe it's time to go get that counselor and make that appointment and begin just to, let's pull it out. When we pull it out, even with one person, doesn't have to be on stage, doesn't have to be on a show like this, and shed light on that. It's never as bad as how it feels when we hold it in the dark.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes.
That is so true. We're about to run out of time, and I still want to talk. But no, because silently keeping it in, we just make it so much bigger, so much bigger.
Just pull it out. Pull it out.
Just speak it.
Just speak it.
Okay, we're about to wrap up, and I want you to talk to that camera right there.
Okay.
I want you to talk to somebody who is experiencing shame. What is God giving you to say to them?
You know, I want you to know from this time together that everybody experiences this, and you know all the places it can come from. You get it that even we have gone through this, but God is there for you. And I hope that you will consider, as we talked about, talking to one person. And I'm willing to even say that if you can connect with Shantae or myself, that we would be thrilled and blessed to be your person if you would so choose. Let's begin to get it out in the light. I promise you it will be better, smoother, easier, and than you can ever imagine. And this idea of practicing radical self-acceptance starts today.
Oh, thank you, Terilee. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and sharing these ways to overcome shame. Will you briefly, I know we've talked about Bree Talks, but can you tell our audience how else they can connect with you and some things that you got going on right now?
Of course. So I am so excited to share with you this idea of being able to give a talk that's your story, your cause, or your method in the most impactful way. We allow options online to speak on the Bree Talk stage online, and also places in person, definitely here in the DFW area, because that's where I am. And as God opens doors around the world, we will have those opportunities as well. In fact, this is new news. We're partnering with Freedom Talks Global to be able to allow speakers a chance to speak in Manila, Philippines, in Bali, Indonesia, and in Singapore in May. There's plenty of opportunity. Some of you might be ready for a big stage. Some might be telling one person, but you can find Bree Talks at letstalkbri.com, or find me online on my socials. I would love to connect with you and help you get your story out. Shantae's right. You don't have to be a professional speaker to begin telling your story.
Yes. And there we have it, girl. Thank you so much. I have enjoyed this conversation so much, and I'm going to create 2 more shows just so we can talk about between 1 and 2. Okay. I want to thank our audience for joining us tonight. So make sure you join us next week as Liz Gabriel will be our guest. It's going to be fun. But until then, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to let you know that I love you and I'm praying for you. I want you to go be great. Good night.